Good morning to you, Cliona.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. A little early.
I've just seen this headline. Ian Wright's 7 million memorabilia haul sold off after ex-wife failed to keep up with storage payments. I didn't see the 7 million figure until right this second. I thought it was like a few posters and a pair of boots.
Yeah, and I just immediately my thought was, why does she have to do the payments?
Well, and also, why is it worth 7 million quid? Is that what she got in the divorce?
Very expensive storage, whatever happened there.
Yeah, I mean, how much tat do you need for it to be worth 7 million?
Oh yeah, exactly. He just needed somebody to go in and do a good clear out.
There's a lot of those hoarding programs that I never quite watch enough to know the names of on TV.
Yeah, I wondered as well, like, yeah, exactly, why would you keep all that stuff? But he was always clearly a very sentimental guy, wasn't he? The one thing I liked about Wright was when he always said about he used to give back his money, his expenses for playing for England, because he said it was a privilege, and that made me like him actually. Yeah. He used to like him. Then when he said that, I thought, well, that's fair dues. So maybe it was all his English memorabilia, he just couldn't give it away. Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and like he had a good career, right? A good career, not like an all-time great, super stratospheric, like 4 Champions Leagues and a Golden Boot or anything.
Yes.
Oh, I wonder what it was that actually was worth
what was in there.
Yeah, if anybody can fill us in on the details of that. We're also going to talk about a bunch of other stuff that are making our OTB AM Tuesday morning breakfast menu. That's coming for you in a little while. But first, let's bring you through the newspapers.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
It is literally the same picture of Mohamed Salah in different sizes on the back page of every single newspaper today. It's him pointing his finger at the camera ahead of this game against Roma tonight. Salah to take aim at old Roma friends is the headline on the back of the Irish Independent this morning. Munster Academy to lessen numbers in major restructuring is a really interesting story from Cian Tracy at the bottom of that less is more for the Munster Academy. They're cutting down the number of people that they're going to work with in a bid to try and get more of the players actually through the pathway to the senior team. And there's also an interesting story there about Carlo being hit by Brendan Murphy deciding that he's going to spend the summer in the USA playing Gaelic football. This is one of those stories that, it's funny, the GPA get hammered for raising money in America, and they get accused of fishing in the same pot as local GAA. That it's the same bunch of people who are
giving out the money.
But massive amounts of money are spent on bringing Irish players over to America to play ball in the summer, and it's like, well, sure, that's grand.
Yeah, and that has existed as time immemorial, and they've changed the rules so many times to try and stop people going. But when it happens in a county, I think, like Carlow, and you have a marquee player like him and he goes, that's a big blow to them. And obviously they have had huge momentum off their Division 4 season in the league. So, I always feel sorry for, there's counties that can sustain players going in the summer, but they definitely can't, and Brendan Murphy is the fulcrum of that team, so
and they were the story of the summer last year in the early part of the summer with their run in the championship, and then they sustained that, and that so rarely happens. Normally they come out of nowhere, a team has a 6-week period where everything clicks for them and then they disappear again, but they've literally built on it. And
what surprises me, I suppose, is that a lot of their success has been built by Turric O'Brien, the manager, creating this family, creating this, pride in Carlow, this hashtag Carlow Rising, this notion of everyone rowing in behind the county. So I am surprised to see a player who's so central to them leaving when this sort of, brothers in arms thing is there. So you can only presume the reason for it is financial, and that's very often why players go, because somebody offers them a job and they get good money over there as well. But it's a huge loss to them. It is. And I noticed actually also Gordon Manning has in the Sun today, Meath have lost 5 players since the end of the league, including Sean Tobin, who'd be would be the bigger known player. And this is just around the time of year where these stories start breaking, where people we suddenly, and because there has been this lull in the inter-county game, they're only starting to come out now. Who's not going to be around this summer, but that's the first big news really of it.
Yeah, and look, it all goes back to the sustainability of the fixture system, and is there any point in staying? And then there are also people who are just going to go because there's the opportunity to go and have a summer in America, having the time of your life.
Yeah, and you look at, it's always been that thing. Like, there was always that thing that people would go to America, and there are certain cities in America as well that always seem to have money to bring them as well. But I'm just surprised at it happening now to Carlo, because, as I said, they have this whole Band of Brothers thing going on, and that's what really has helped them so greatly.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the Irish Examiner, and they also have Mohamed Salah on the front. And their headline is "Use the Momentum, Klopp wants Pool to fire like Fergie's United." And then obviously they have the continuing fallout from Munster's defeat at the top there. Room for improvement, Simon Lewis, and where Munster are falling short in their quest for glory. Keith Earle's going to join us in the studio a little bit later on to talk to us about some of the other stuff apart from the match itself. And then Damien Comer has given a very un-GAA interview where he says that, yeah, we could win the All-Ireland, and actually the Dubs are beatable. So fair play, I say, to Damien Comer for telling the truth and not going, yeah, sure, we'll see what happens. We'll sure it'll be difficult for us to kick the ball kicked out to Dublin. Like, yeah, let's go toe to toe and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think it probably reflects, how Galway feel. They are definitely a team that are on the up. They showed in the league they're not afraid of Dublin, and you're right. It's really refreshing to see somebody come out and be honest and say it. Yeah,
we have some confidence.
Yeah,
imagine that. Young Irish people with confidence. Well, he'll have his wings clipped fairly soon, no doubt.
Well, that's the point. Yes, so many managers seem to, have them, zip-lipped, say, don't say anything. Whatever you say, don't say anything. Maybe it's just the fact that nothing has really started yet.
Isn't Galway the one county though where actually they like that little bit of swagger? I mean, that's my experience as a Kildare supporter of coming up against Galway, where they come from nowhere and it's like, no, we're Galway, like we're one of the greatest teams of all time.
Well, yeah, and also they always had this attacking flair. So if you think back even to people like John Donlan and Pádraig Joyce and people like that, Michael Donlan, do you know what I mean? Their forwards particularly are those kind of players who just played with that kind of freedom. They didn't
collars
really.
Up.
Yeah, collars up, exactly. Yeah. It's nice to see it, as you said.
Yeah,
different.
No, totally. On to the Irish Times next, and again, Damien Comer makes the. So it's always hard to know exactly what the Irish Times are leading with. They're leading today with Donald McRae's brilliant interview with Jurgen Klopp. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, and then just the match preview from Andy Hunter in The Guardian. Really, the expectation is that Liverpool are going to win this because it's Roma and it's not one of the European heavyweights, but they also have the Damien Comer story. He was the PwC GPA Player of the Month, and that's why he was doing that interview in football. The hurler was Jason Ford. So some Jason Ford interviews in the other pages where he's actually given out about social media being the reason that he ended up getting the ban last year. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think social media was the reason for it, in fairness. And he's very soft on Davy Fitz, on that instance. And saying, it was kind of blown.
You don't want to give Davy Fitz any ammunition for the dressing room wall.
Yeah, but I don't think the CCCC judge on social media. I think they unfortunately they usually go with where the live TV cameras are and what was caught on TV, and that's the reality.
TV's fault.
It was TV's fault, not social media. And
here's a Declan Bogue story that is in the Examiner, in the Times and the Independent today. BBC viewers may miss out on most Ulster games. This is a really interesting story, and it's part of the fallout from the advent of the Super 8s, one of the laws of unintended consequences. So there will be more big games this year, but the same TV contracts will persist.
Yeah.
Which means that the TV companies have rights to a certain number of games. And so, having a brain, they've decided to wait until the games get good and meaningful to select their games. And so, some of the early season games in, say, for example, the Ulster Championship won't now be shown on TV. Yeah,
and that will be a big blow, I think, to a lot of people in Ulster, because they do like to, I think they like to watch it, they like to see the coverage. And also, and it's a strange thing, it seems BBC provide the feed for RTE, so it's RTE, in other words, it's RTE's decision to concentrate on the Super 8s is going to mean that BBC won't actually be able to show. They're only showing, I think, 2 games in the Ulster Championship.
The big one that won't be shown at the moment, unless something changes, is
Tyrone Monaghan.
Yeah, good game.
Yeah, really good game. I mean, I'm really surprised that won't. Could somebody else come in and take it? Could Sky or somebody maybe come in? And we don't know. I mean, RTE haven't said yet what games they're covering, but obviously he has a good tip here, and that's a good story. But maybe somebody else. Does it leave room for somebody else to try and come in there that already have them? But again, Sky have only a certain number of games.
Yeah, so if you're Sky, do you waste it on an Ulster Championship game, or do you hold it until it's actually...
Say waste it on an Ulster Championship game. Spoken like a Kildare man.
The final round of
you wouldn't think like that if you were Monaghan or
Super
Tyrone.
8s. But then maybe, like I think Monaghan and Tyrone will both be in the Super 8s.
Yeah.
And they could actually meet again.
Yeah.
So you could have the exact same game, the same venue, except meaning a place in the All-Ireland semi-final, or it's just deciding who has to play one extra match in the qualifiers.
Yeah, but I just think in Ulster people are they're very much inclined to look for their local TV coverage of it, though. So I think that will cause a stir.
Is there a possibility that it means that more people actually go to the matches, that these games are all now sellouts?
Yeah, and it is one of the arguments, isn't it, that so much live coverage has I think it has affected the number of, and particularly if it's a bad day, or do you know what I mean? And it's cost is a factor as well for families. So maybe, I mean, and I think even Pádraig Duffy, before over several years it looked to me as if he was trying to cut back at some point on the live coverage, because it was affecting games in some provinces.
I've no doubt it'll have full radio coverage.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. All right, where's next after the Times? Is the Guardian. Yeah, so obviously the Jurgen Klopp interview that Donald McRae has done. Klopp lets rip Roma, Salah, Merkel, Man City and Brexit. The Brexit stuff is among the most interesting, but we were just saying here, it's obviously a great photograph, that you read this online last night.
I read this online yesterday. Yeah, I read this online. Yeah, which really is amazing how much brilliant stuff newspapers are giving away now. The Guardian always has that message that comes up and says, you know, please, if you like our stuff, pay for it. But I was really surprised, particularly because of the quality of the interview with McRae. It's so good. Like he crosses everything from, you know, asking him would he run for office in Germany. You know, there's so much stuff in it, and I was really surprised to read it and then see that it was in today's papers.
Yeah.
That it's in the print a day later. But it is, you know, it's a state of the nation from Klopp. Interestingly, you know, it was been used to deflect a lot of stuff away from, but he obviously got this over the weekend with him, I think, and put it out. There's something about Klopp, like just sometimes when you think, you know, he's so far up himself, then, you know, he surprises you with something and you think, no. And I saw a great interview with him recently on TV where, you know, he was talking about when he was a kid and getting shirts and boots, and he would never take them off, and he ran around the house all day long in his football boots and his shirt, and he never took it off, you know. And there is that boyish, you know, charm about him, just that it's an infectious enthusiasm. Yeah.
Definitely one of the most compelling figures in world football at the moment, and it turns out really talented. Like nothing that he's achieved has been a fluke at any stage of the way. Because there was times where I was like, oh, he can't defend, his team's not defend, he knows nothing about football. It was like, well, hang on a second, you know, just give him. And then he signs Virgil van Dijk, and suddenly it's like, ooh. Actually, he knows a lot about football.
Yeah, and he's the only one in England who's figured out how to beat Man City this season as well. Do you know what I mean? But this one I like. What I like about it as well is just his worldview. You know what I mean? Like, how does he end up talking about Brexit, and, you know, how does he end up talking about the European Union and Merkel and all that kind of stuff? Because he's interested. He's interested in politics, you know. And the one thing you could always say about him, and there's a great line from McRae at the beginning of it about, you know, he's more than this mad gurning lunatic on a sideline, you know, is that world view, you know. And he talks about, you know, he's talking about the European Union and what it's done, and you know, about world things.
A sense of context and history, and
yeah, exactly. So many managers, you think they have nothing outside of football. Yeah. He definitely has.
Well, Wenger, for example, one of the points that's been made this week is that, like, Wenger completely obsessed by football, bragging about working 7 days a week, and it's well, you know, maybe you should be able to communicate with your players a bit better by having some life experience outside. I mean, look, Wenger's really rich and successful, and he's going to die a happy man, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I did think it was strange this week, the way he stressed that thing of I've worked 7 days a week, and you thought, you don't have to prove that anymore. Why would you be making such a big deal of that?
Yeah.
You know, and also as people said, where will he go now? Like, in terms of what you must have a life outside football.
Yeah.
You know, even Fergie had a life outside football. We know he liked his glass of wine.
And
we know
racing.
He liked his racing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Did he like the racing just because, you know, I'm not sure. Let's get back into the Rocket Gibraltar. It's been a while since we talked about it. Final story for now, for me, is the Irish News, and again, they also have Jurgen Klopp on the back. The only ones who don't have Mohamed Salah. Reds can't play on the pass, says Klopp. And then that's a story about Rafferty, a worry for Armagh. So we're going to start getting these injury worry stories ahead of the championship, which is actually like 2.5 weeks away now. It's kind of breathing down our neck. And
it's the surprising thing, I think, is that there's more GAA in it. But I know it's meant to be closed season and everything, and that's why I think that Brendan Murphy story is a great story to break this morning, and that BBC story, because people are just crying out for inter-county news at this stage.
The official launches are all happening this week as well. We're just staffing up, deciding who's going to go to which of the provinces, and so I think that's the bit where the GAA riders start clicking back into gear. You see the match previews, you start seeing the championship pullouts, all that kind of stuff. I assume.
Yeah, yeah. And there was actually one of the interesting things in the papers today, it's in a few of them, is the CPA, you know, the Club Players Association, because, you know, they have obviously been monitoring the amount of club action that's been taking place in this so-called, you know, club month of April. And I think was it 50, between 50 and 60 said they were happy with the amount of club action that happened.
A similar amount said they hadn't had a master fixture list for the year.
But that's what they were giving out, but more primarily is why don't they have a master fixture for the beginning of the year? Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of really good pieces in the Examiner in particular. There's a Mike Quirk piece where he's talking about how the county players didn't play league matches at the weekend, even though they're supposed to be available for their clubs. The players were available, apparently, according to the county board. That's like a very swiftly, let's answer. Jesus, he's got a column in the Examiner about it. We better issue a statement. No, they were all grand. They were all totally available. They just couldn't, for whatever collective reason, at the same time, play for their clubs.
Mike Quirk's column is always worth reading. Yeah. It's a really good column.
A really clever guy.
Yeah, he's a good writer.
So where are we going next, Cliona?
Well, again, the Times Ireland, again, it's the same thing. Mo Salah, Jason Ford, Earls as well. The one that interested me in the Times Ireland was the Dylan Hartley story. Because he's not going to go on tour with England this summer because he's had 3 concussions in 3 seasons. And he talked about it, I think, earlier this year. And it's just like, you know, if he's had that series of concussions and his club said he has to take the summer off, that's a worrying thing. And he's already talked about it this year. He said, you know, when you have kids, you start to think about these things. Yeah. So that's the question is, you know, and will he, if he comes back, you know, will he captain England? I mean, Farrell is there and he's obviously the obvious one that will take over there as well. So I thought that one was interesting.
He got that concussion against Ireland. So
that's the one he got, exactly.
He's been out since that game.
He's been out since then, yeah.
He isn't going to play now until next August or September.
Yeah, yeah. The Mirror, again, I suppose a lot of them have stories about Ulster and Leinster and the players and where they're going to go. I thought it was best covered probably by Jerry Thornley in the Irish Times and a couple of people who make the same point, which is that this talk of Ross Byrne, pressure being put on Leinster to let Ross Byrne or Joey Carberry go to Ulster. Unlike somebody like Geordie Murphy, whose contract is up, they're still in the middle of their contract. Yeah. And John Fogarty was wheeled out by Leinster yesterday to say they won't be going unless, you know, it was something they wanted to do. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it was well covered here yesterday by Brian O'Driscoll. I think the really interesting thing is that if RFU are pushing them, that they're pushing them to Ulster. Because if you look at Munster, wouldn't Munster be a great fit for Carberry?
Who would you rather go to?
Who needs somebody at 10 and 15, right? And if you're worried about a club that, you know, the coaching or the competition quality mightn't be great, Munster would be a good fit as well. I noticed he said last weekend, that was a really interesting quote from him in a good interview, Kieran Shannon. He said, Carberry said, I'm impatient about a lot of things in life, but I'm not impatient about this. Yeah.
Literally at the moment, it seems like Leinster is one of the best organised, most well-run clubs in world rugby. Yeah. And in Stuart Lancaster, you have a coach who is reaching the peak of his powers, who has like 25 years of experience, particularly of bringing young players through. So if you're looking at that as him, as Carberry, it's like, okay, well, Johnny Sexton is the best out half in the world or the second best out half. Week by week, it changes between whether or not Barrett or him, where everybody thinks is the best. So if I can get ahead of him, then I'm actually going to be one of the best players in the world.
So how do I get ahead of him?
Or alternatively,
and I got one go at it last year.
Alternatively, I go up to Ulster and play behind a pack that's not great with a coach that I don't know, who might not actually like me or want me. What are you going to do?
Yeah, or what if it was Munster? What if the suggestion would be to Munster? I think that would be, nobody has even, now obviously that's not the IRFU's suggestion, but it is an interesting one. And the thing about Carberry is he has lived a very peripatetic life. He came from New Zealand, 11 to Ireland. He had to fit in a Thai, learn a new way of life. He went to Blackrock for his leaving cert, particularly for rugby. He went from UCD to Clontarf, particularly for rugby. So he's a guy who's not afraid to make decisions for rugby. Yeah. And I just think it's an interesting one. Would anybody want to leave Leinster at the moment? No, of course not, you know. But if you're pragmatic, how patient are you going to be? It's interesting to see what it was. But the tenor of all the pieces today is Leinster saying these guys will be going nowhere unless they want to go somewhere.
Yeah, and that puts pressure on them because obviously they'll feel like, you know, off the record stuff can be said to them about their international futures, like you know, a quiet warning or a, well, it would be better for you if you did this. And like,
very interesting. Fogarty says in that piece in the Irish Times about how did the Geordie Murphy thing happen?
Yeah,
and he says, I don't know.
I was told about that.
I was told about that. I think is interesting. And
actually on a need to know basis.
Yeah, actually, and in the Herald today, Des Berry has a list of the amount of Ulster players that are already in Leinster players that are already in Ulster. Yeah, and like they have 3 academy players. Then they have Alan O'Connor, John Cooney, Nick Timoney and Dave Shannon. We know Geordie Murphy and Marty Moore are going up to M1 as well this summer or whatever. So the big question I ask is, Ulster apparently have a lot of money. They don't seem to be short of money. Why are they not developing this depth themselves? Yeah, that is a question worth asking.
Well, they did let Chris Farrell go, and they did let Sam Arnold go. So it's not like they've also been brilliant at minding their own talent coming through the ranks. You know, like Brian O'Driscoll used the word basket case in connection with it yesterday, and he was picked up about it on Twitter and shot back immediately with the list of things that aren't going well for them at the moment. And you're like, well, it's hard to say that it's a well-run club. And this is the CEO of Ulster Rugby who stood up 7 years ago and said, oh, we're going to be world class, we're going to be world leaders. And it's like, it's been pretty much downhill ever since. Like, at some point, somebody in that hierarchy has to be held accountable.
And let's just say there's a whole load of stuff that's happened this year, clearly, that has caused havoc for them. Do you know what I mean? That you could never have, as a CEO, envisioned any of that happening, to be fair.
No, but you could have been better with your academy system. You could have had a better recruitment system.
That's the question I'd ask. Where is the depth in their academy exactly? Why is it that Leinster's academy seems to have such, like, it seems to have a treble depth from everybody else's academy? They're just churning them out.
I mean, mostly I think it's to do with the amount of money that's spent on the schools teams in the private schools and the facilities and coaches that they have.
Possibly, that's exactly
their competitive advantage. A couple of quick texts for you. Darren Sherlock says, FFS. We have the afters of a family wedding on the day of Monaghan Tyrone. We were hoping to watch in the pub. Now, that's not to say that Sky won't step in, and you will be able to watch it in the pub. Sky to the rescue in that circumstance. Noel Cahill says that it shows that players in weaker counties do not believe in the structures. This is the news that Brendan Murphy is heading to the States for the summer. I mean, it's true, and also the 5 Meath players, like, who actually really have nothing to play for when you think about it.
Yeah, and like I see this in women's Gaelic all the time, where a lot of players, women's Gaelic really suffers from a lot of players going to America in the summer or going travelling in the summer, and the reason for it is that there is no prestige to staying to play for their counties. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's just not that, you know, bonus that there is for men to play for their inter-county games, you know, where, you know, it's a big deal, and I just think that prestige thing is lacking in a lot of women's counties, and so it happens in the weaker men's counties as well, but it is a bad indictment that prestige is not there for Meath now, you know. And as I said, after winning something, it's a big hit for Carlow. Yeah. You know, when they seem to be building such momentum.
Kevin McCallion, I think the most stereotypical GAA response ever to Damien Comer's mild bit of confidence. It's okay saying the Dubs are beatable, but doing it is totally different. Comer should be more worried about baiting Mayo in a few weeks. I have no doubt he's absolutely 100% focused.
Well, maybe that's why he was talking about Dublin so much.
Exactly, yeah. It's a good
anything but Mayo to be asked about.
Diversionary tactic, but yeah, thanks for that, Kevin. Bang on cue. Where next?
The Star, obviously, and a lot of them are talking about that, you know, kick Mo and you'll cop it, and it's just the whole thing of will Farah be targeted by Roma, you know, and who's going to take him on, if you like. So that's across a lot of them. But the one that interested me was there was a piece saying Kolarov says there's no plan in place for Salah, which seems bizarre because surely you have a complete lie. Yeah. Another one, Eamon Dunphy's column obviously is always interesting for people, and the headline on it is the first cut is the deepest, and in terms of, you know, at Anfield, home advantage and everything. But there's a piece in the London Times, which is really interesting, times.ie, and they're saying that actually if you look at the statistics of all the top English clubs in Europe in the last few years, Liverpool are the ones with the worst home advantage statistics.
Right.
If you break it down, actually, it's less of an advantage for them than it was for people like Chelsea and Man United or whatever.
Right, that's interesting.
In the Champions League, yeah. So statistics, damned lies in statistics. You never know. The Sun again. The headline is, you know, Klopp, Mo going to get a kick in. Everybody's worried about this. Ian Wright has a good piece and probably captures that thing that Roma sold a 30 million player and now they're facing a 100 million superstar.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is
6 months later.
It's incredible, you know, his rise in such a short time is the incredible thing, I suppose, as well. And in the same week that he's just got Player of the Year in England as well. And Neil O'Riordan has a good piece as well in The Sun, and that's on Wes Hoolahan. He won't return to the League of Ireland. And, of course, the argument is, the thinking was, I suppose, could he come back? He's ex-Shelbourne, Owen Heary's in charge, and would he come back to Shelbourne?
It'll be an amazing end.
He has ruled it out in this piece anyway, so yeah. But you never know. Damien Duff came back, didn't he?
Yeah, like Wes definitely has a life in Norwich, I think. So kind of very embedded in the community as well, so it'll be interesting to see where he does fetch up.
But imagine if he ever did come back. You know, because there's such a love for him in this country.
Yeah,
you know.
It would put a lot of numbers on.
It surely would. And presumably would have to be somewhere like, you know, Shelbourne, where he played before, and he has that connection. And the other one in the, I think Gordon Manning has it in The Sun as well, and here's another one, the GAA story's starting to break. Jack Guiney is gone off the Wexford hurling panel.
All right.
Yeah, again. Is the phrase again, because he went off it before, and allegedly for disciplinary reasons. Right,
that's a pity, because it looked like him and Davy had some kind of coming together, and they'd understood each other.
Yeah, and then he got injured, and he was out for a long time with injury as well. But he is one of those players who undoubtedly has talent.
Yeah.
But for some reason doesn't seem to stay, or he has problems staying on county panels.
And like
senior county panel anyway.
The commitment that Davy requires from, you know, last year, whenever they trained that 6,000 days in a row, whatever it was, it's pretty severe and very intense. So hopefully at some point Jack Guiney
so Jason Byrne has the story actually, and it's he's been asked quote for quote for disciplinary reasons. So it apparently happened last week.
Okay.
And there's, you know, a lot of time between now and championship, and, you know, things can change. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's always that can happen.
Have we one last paper to go through?
I think that's the lot. Yeah. I think so.